All right. Welcome to More or Less. We are here this morning with the lovely Sarah Kinsley. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And on our show, we have all of our guests do a self-intro, if you wouldn't mind.
Whoa, okay. Oh my God. I'm Sarah Kinsley. I'm a musician and a producer, and I live in New York, and I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. And in this moment, how are you really feeling, more or less?
So calm.
Calm.
Yeah, really calm and very peaceful right now.
Incredible.
We'll see if that changes.
In New York, that's a tough feeling to come by.
Yeah, but it's really nice and quiet in here, so I feel really peaceful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And the follow-up we ask everyone is, what is one thing you need more of and one thing you need less of? Could be an emotion, a feeling.
This is really difficult.
First thing that comes to mind, no pressure.
I need more time in cool wind and air. I would like that, and I need less. I need less time alone. I think I'm really ready to get out on the road and see people. I feel like I've just been hibernating over the summer, and it's a weird inverse of seasons almost, where I'm ready to get out and go.
It'll be interesting. For those listening, Sarah's about to head out on a headline tour, going from hibernation, isolation in the summer to then being surrounded by hundreds of people all the time. How are you feeling about that transition?
I'm just so excited. I haven't really been on the road in a while. I think the last time I was properly was maybe in April. So I've just had months alone with this music and preparing everything that all I want to do is get it out of my system and share it with people and kind of feel the electricity of those shows and with people. And I feel like I really come alive during the shows, and it's just very refreshing for me. So I'm ready for that.
Can you describe to me the connection and what it feels like on stage when you're communicating, even if it's with your band that you love or the people in front of you? Describe that electricity for me.
It's honestly, I feel like I black out every single show. I feel like I don't even know what's happening sometimes, but it's incredibly spiritual sometimes because we rehearse and we practice and we really methodically try to go through the music and the parts and what creates the songs. But then when you play them live in front of everyone else, it just completely changes. No matter how hard you try to have it contained as one thing, it's inevitable that the sound changes with people in a room and the way people experience it. But I don't know. I'm also just excited for it because there's so much movement that happens at these shows, and I feel like the people that come are very willing to just be a bit more free and liberated with their movement and just come and do whatever. And so I really appreciate my music being the vessel for that movement and for that energy, I guess.
Yeah. And did I hear that you bring a sampler pad on the road?
I do. I don't know if I'll bring it for this tour, but I have in the past, yeah.
So for those listening, what I read, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is that you would sample every night, have the audience sing back, and it would be on loop for as you're playing the music. The audience would hear themselves through the note, almost like crowd participation. And I think that is a wild form of connection and super, super cool.
Oh, thank you.
So what an incredible, how did that idea even come about?
I actually don't remember how
it just happened.
Thought of it. I remember we were kind of putting together a set list and trying to figure out, it's always a weird balance between the new and the old, the future and the past. Okay, what of this record do we want to play? What about the past EPs? And there was a song from maybe the second EP I'd ever released that has this really rhythmic, repetitive melody in it. And yeah, I just don't know where it originated from, but we thought it would be really, really cool to, I don't know, get this sampler pad. And it was kind of a big risk at the start because there were all of these like mathematical, logistical issues of timing up the rest of the band with this thing that is programmed. But there was a kind of a lot of magic in it because if you were in the crowd that night, it was like, you can't recreate this every night. Like the actual note that people are singing is actually completely different every single night. So it was this weird like risk that we were taking, and a source of slight stress for me and the band. But I had this mic and a mixer that would go into the sampler pad, and we would ask the entire crowd to just sing one note. And it's strange because it's very inevitable that everyone singing produces these weird harmonies sometimes, even though everyone is singing the same note, people sing it in different octaves. And when we take the note into the sampler pad, you can play it then in as like a keyboard. And so we'd use that and play it through the song. And it was just like very magical and fun.
And that keeps it fun every night. I'm sure a little stressful, but
I don't think we'll do it this tour, but
cool nonetheless.
Fun. Yeah, really fun.
And Sarah, you mentioned, that your music can serve as a vessel for people to feel free and dance. Are there any artists for you or any shows that you've been to where you've experienced that feeling?
Totally. The most recent show that I went to see this artist Lorraine at the Music Hall of Williamsburg, and it was incredible. I mean, there were some parts of this show that, when you just go to a concert and it's so loud and you kind of like feel it throughout your body.
Your vibrations.
Yeah, and you just like feel like the sound is like like excavating a part of your body almost, or like your soul is coming out through the music. And I just remember, it was so loud at one point, like there was so much distortion going on stage, and the band is incredible, but I just felt like, I don't know, like a part of me, like I was standing completely still, but I felt like a part of me was moving, and it was really strange. But I felt incredible during that show. And she's really amazing. I love her music. But definitely that show was the most recent time I felt like that.
There's nothing cooler than leaving a venue and not being able to hear.
Your ear.
Everything's just like pulsing.
Tinnitus, yeah.
It's the coolest feeling that music has the ability to evoke that. An entire full body experience when you go to a show. Mm-hmm. And I think it's incredible that you're able to offer that to other people.
I hope so. That's the goal. Not to like burn people's ears, but to give an hour or an hour and a half of something really memorable is really the goal. Yeah.
I want to segue into kind of the early days. So you grew up as a classical musician, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And if I read correctly, you strayed away from classical music because you were seeking more freedom outside the box. And classical music, as I'm sure many people know, is really strict, and you have to be on the proper tempo. And there's a lot of factors. So I'd love to kind of learn more of that side of your story and mm-hmm. how that influences who you are today.
Yeah, classical music is like, I don't know, I think a lot of people, especially people who start really, really young, end up growing up with this weird relationship to it because, at least for me, I loved the music so much. Like it was basically my entire life for more than 10 or 15 years. And it's strict, but it can also be incredibly liberating because it's really one of the only forms of music that you can play with anyone. You don't have to speak the same language to understand it, and the sort of instructions that you're given to participate in classical music, if you have that language and you have access to that, you can kind of play it with anyone, if you speak it and engage in it in that way. But I think that when I was growing up, I always felt like there was a huge difference between that world, which was a bit more mellow and like really poised and elegant and like weirdly diplomatic. There was a huge difference between that and then like pop music and just rebelling and being so free and a bit more wild and chaotic with what I listened to and just how I felt in life. And yeah, there was always just a weird divide between the two that I still feel like to this day I haven't really reconciled.
Yeah. Did you find at what age did you start to kind of push the envelope a little bit and want to kind of branch into pop or just experiment with something different outside of classical?
I think when I was around like 13, like a very like teen prepubescent age of angst and like a lot of drama. But I feel like that period of growth aligned with like my love for pop music, where I was just listening to the radio all the time, listening to like the top 200, like truly, really, like not even that meaningful of music really, but just like great pop music, you know? And yeah, I just loved that stuff so much. And I think because it was so attractive as this thing that I wasn't really supposed to be doing, or something that was like, you know, not as scholarly or not as like clean and like perfect as classical music. It was interesting because it was shiny and new and sort of magic in that way. I don't know. It's always the like, I feel like when you grow up in an environment that's so sort of sheltered in that, like that special magic shiny thing is like always just way more fascinating. And I feel like I just sprinted towards that like as fast as I could.
Did the rigidity and the structure of classical music impact you in other areas of your life, maybe in how you approach school or how you approached friendships? Were things always by the book?
I mean, maybe. I think that like being an orchestra kid is a strange phenomenon because it's like, I don't know, I'm like kind of ashamed of it growing up. And then as I got older, I was like, no, this is actually so amazing and cool and I love it. And you just like, I think classical music you can harbor a lot of competition sometimes and a lot of envy. And when you're in an orchestra, it's completely different because you have to work together as this collective thing. So I feel like I was so close with a lot of people that I played music with growing up, and like us talking about music and music being the definitive aspect of our relationship, like has influenced so many other friendships in my life where like just art and creativity takes up a lot of space in like the love I share with people. And it's how I sort of develop that sense of meaning, I guess.
Yeah, there's a powerful connection there. And it still holds true with how you connect with others today through music.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like people that I have wanted to get involved in my project, it's the same thing where it's so much more than just work. Like it's truly deeply very personal, and there's a lot of love there.
Well, especially when you're writing and sharing the very vulnerable, not so pretty parts of you.
Yeah.
How has your songwriting process changed over the course? Kind of talking about Escaper Now, which is now out, and you can listen to Sarah's debut album. How has songwriting shifted from when it was you just starting with a journal to now having collaborators?
Yeah, I mean, it's still pretty insular because I have yet to like really write with other people. It's still very much just like a process that I keep to myself, and honestly, I prefer it that way because most of the time it's just me like mumbling over a piano and acting like an insane woman at home. But yeah, I think it's interesting because now that I feel like I'm so aware of how people interpret the lyrics that I write and the music that I'm making, that there's this weird like very cyclical process that happens of like thinking of how a lyric will be perceived before it's even written. And sometimes that can kind of influence like how vulnerable I want to be. But especially with this album, like I don't really think I held back that much still. And I prefer it that way. I feel a really strong bond between like what I write and what people feel when they listen to my music. So I don't want to change that, you know?
Given that kind of in the back of your mind, you're thinking about the reaction or how people are going to interpret it for themselves, do you find yourself sometimes keeping lyrics intentionally broad or general so that more folks can relate to it? Or do you gravitate towards the specificity for the experience that you lived in?
I mean, I always prefer ambiguity, and a metaphor having so many different meanings. I always love that. There's some lyrics on the album that are like really, really, really straightforward. And I don't know. I don't want to over-explain myself almost, like I want the music to speak for itself. And I love the moments after shows when I speak to people and they say like, oh, this song, the King is such a love song for me and it's this. And for me, it's not that at all. Like I don't relate to that at all, but I enjoy that something that is an extension of me can mean something totally different to somebody else. I think it's just very exciting when that happens.
Yeah, I think there's incredible lyrics on this album, and I want to give you all the kudos. One of them being "Everything changed, but my mind couldn't change me" on the title track. Mm-hmm. The title track is probably my favorite on the album.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's beautifully written and sonically really special, and there's so much I want to talk about with this album. But to compartmentalize, there's a lot of visuals on this album that it transports you into a different world, and I can almost see the soundscapes in my own head. And I believe that you were writing almost in colors or trying to think of colors. Is there any like synesthesia that comes with an album? Because I don't have synesthesia, but I was listening to it and I was like, oh, I could envision colors here.
Yeah, no, I don't have it either. I'm so jealous of people that do.
My boyfriend has.
Oh my God. Like, actually, if I could have like one wish, that it would be to just experience that once, because I'm just so curious. Like, I feel like I had like an enemy in high school or something who had synesthesia, and I was like, you don't deserve this. Like, I was so jealous that, like, I remember like this person would talk about like people as colors.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think we were in a class together and she said I was sky blue, and I was so surprised. Or maybe I can't remember what color I was, but I was just like, this is so fascinating. Or I knew someone who could like have specific tastes when they heard music, and I'm just so fascinated by it.
Superpower.
It's a superpower. I mean, it's strange because I get that it's like a condition and I'm like glamorizing it, but I'm also like, this is
There's so
unbelievably
much beauty
cool
in it, though. It's so special. I think humans are incredibly special in their own ways, but what a cool way to see the world.
I know, it's so cool.
So in ways you can activate color, I'm thinking like, what's Sarah going to do for lighting on the tour with some of these songs? Like, because it does take you to a different world. And I'm curious if the worlds evolved as you were writing the album. Like, did you find yourself transporting to different places?
Totally. I think that's like a huge theme on the album too. It's like portals and universes and realms and all of that. And that totally involves colors and feeling and what that looks like. And I think from the get-go, I knew that it was like a very warm yellow, orange, gold record, which is strange, but it just felt like a lot of the instrumentation when we were working on it together. I would literally be saying things like, it needs to be more warm, or I need this to feel not as metallic and like not as cold. And it's hard because I don't know how to express what I want sometimes without going into that, which can be kind of confusing. And like my co-producer John sometimes would just be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it's just like a weird, almost like a language thing. But yeah, it's a very warm album for me.
I would agree with that. I would 100% agree with that. Mm-hmm. The other big interpretation on the album for me as a listener, and I'll share with you, is I found it to be a body of work that encompasses grief and loss and how endings make way for new beginnings. And we have to let go in order to create space for that. Mm-hmm. I think that's also why Escaper being the title track and all of that fits with my own interpretation. Mm-hmm. But for you, if you could describe the album in one word or a feeling, what would it be?
I mean, it's just light. Like, I think I'm so inspired by how light falls in different places. So, like, light on, shimmering light on the ocean is like a huge inspiration for me. Or like, I was in Italy with a group of friends of mine, and I remember like I had a glass on the table and there's a light above, and when you would move the glass around with different like heights of water in it, it just produces these beautiful shadows, like very simple things. But there's a lot of like grief and loss that I think made its way onto the album, and things that I just really needed to write about and felt the need to immortalize through this music. And I just think light as the sort of prevailing thing that allows us to return to ourselves and to try to choose any sort of optimism is a real thing for me, because it's a real choice, I think, to sort of like come back to yourself post escape is how I think about it.
Perspective is everything too. And I find that even though it is an album that touches on loss, it's not heavy. And that was the lyric I wrote was "There is light ahead of me" on Sublime. And I wholeheartedly agree that the project, although it has these elements of vulnerability and parts of us that are harder to grasp, it's still very light, and it's the cinematic pop universe that exists in the world you're creating. And I think that's really special. And we can take something that happened to us, or something tragic, or something unfortunate that happened in our lives, and we're able to find the light in it. And I'm curious if in the creation of this process, what were some of the lights or the positives that came from those experiences?
Thank you. I'm so surprised that it's like, and like very pleasantly surprised that it's not too heavy, because I think that's perfect. I'm trying to, I don't know, it's like, it's hard to write about grief and loss because they're such complex emotions, regardless of exactly what you're talking about. And I don't know, death as like a real thing and also as a concept is hard to grapple with sometimes. So I don't know, I want to be able to talk about that, but in a way that still allows you to like not be so burdened with a weight while listening to the album. So I'm very grateful that that's coming across. I think like the light moments for me while making it were definitely just having really strange coincidences while making the album. I remember there was a school in Brooklyn that would let me come and play. They had a grand piano in this auditorium, this theater. And while I was finishing the album, they would let me come on days where there would be nobody there, and I could just sit in this giant auditorium and play this grand piano. And I remember I was writing this song that was very specifically about one person I'd been writing about on the album, and like trying to understand my loss of this person. And I went to the auditorium to play it, and I was just taking a voice memo of it, and I was really taking my time with it and just playing it out, and just feeling super emotional. And it had been completely silent in this auditorium for hours, and there was this massive like creak on a like a furnace or something right behind me, and it was terrifying, and it was super loud. I wonder if I still have it in my voice memos to show you, but it just felt like a strange, I don't know. I think sometimes people are like, oh, it's just coincidences. Like, I don't know why people make such a big deal out of these things. But like, that was a huge deal for me, because I felt this really strange acknowledgement of me doing this, and like this weird presence. Or I'd be, when I was working on the album in LA, like sitting outside and going through the park and having just, I don't know, these moments of like catharsis working on the album, and feeling like, I don't think grief ever ends, but you get these moments where you feel like it's so hard to talk about it without like saying the wrong thing, but you feel like it was worth moving through it in a way. And like there was some kind of light at the end of the tunnel, like waiting for you, that, okay, these moments are worth writing about. This friendship is worth immortalizing, all these things, and I don't know, it doesn't really ever end, but it's it's it allows you to continue. I don't know.
Yeah, I think grief is something you don't get over. You just find ways to move through it, and find ways to live a life. I think going back to the album and grief, I viewed it too as more than death as a concept. It was also the loss of friendships and partners and people in our lives that are maybe not there anymore, or the friend we had in kindergarten that we never talked to. There's still an element of grief there, and you grieve it at different times. I think sometimes I'll hear a song and I'll think of someone in my life in the past, and you have that little tug at the heartstrings. And I think the way you're able to express that in music is really, really beautiful. And it's something we don't often hear in music today. I find there's very few songs that are about these topics. So I appreciate you opening up about that part. That's very, very real in all of our lives. I think that's a universal theme. We can all relate to loss in some form.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. It's strange. I think I'm always writing about my music, like just getting older and the past and all of that. But I don't think I understood while writing about that the source of that, like the origin of that, is grief. Like it's a very specific emotion as you get older of like, oh my God, like I don't remember who I was a year ago or who I was in these relationships. Like as you kind of disconnect yourself from a moment or yourself or a person, like you're just grieving so many things at the same time that it's a constant renewal, working through that. But I don't know. I still believe in it as an ultimately very beautiful, very optimistic process.
Yeah.
Because I need to believe in it as an optimistic thing, I feel like. But
yeah, and you bring up, grieving your former selves or former versions of yourselves. We're new people each and every day. We're not who we were yesterday, and maybe there's a grief element to that too, that I'm not who I was, or I'm not as young as I was yesterday. But there's also beauty and evolution in that, and growth, and there's every day you can choose to be better than who you were yesterday. And yeah, I think that there's definitely light ahead if you choose to see it. There's always light. It's just, again, perspective. You want to take it from that.
Yeah, totally.
I want to talk a little bit about tour, going back to tour. So you mentioned being a little nervous before we were recording about being away from home for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
What are the things that you hope to embrace on the road to keep you more grounded? Are you going to try to embrace a routine? Are you going to try to stay connected to your loved ones? What's kind of your game plan for the road ahead?
I think routine is definitely part of it, but it's so strange because I feel like I'll come home from a tour and people will be like, well, how was Seattle? And I'm like, well, it felt exactly the same as every other city, because we wake up, we drive, and then we arrive and we do sound check and we play. And I think it's hard for things to not meld together into one. And I'm trying to really experience the cities. And obviously the shows each night are so different, and the crowds and the way that people experience the music is so different. But it's weird. It's wanting to lean into routine, but also not allow it to completely drown you.
You don't want it to be too
mundane.
rigid. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm trying to do that. I mean, I'm also just excited. I'm nervous, but that's also the same emotion as being excited, I think. So I think that's what it is.
And what boundaries do you put in place for yourself in terms of fan interactions on the road, or preserving your energy, preserving your voice? What are the steps that you take to kind of self-preservation on the road?
I mean, so far, none. I mean,
and that's why we're talking about it.
I know. I mean, the thing is, I feel so much I feel a lot of guilt sometimes if we leave a venue and there's people that I haven't spoken to, because I know that it's a lot of time and it's a lot of effort and a lot of financial burden to see artists that you love on the road. So I'm not taking that lightly, but I feel like I've definitely had some shows where I haven't lost my voice because of singing last night. I've lost it from just talking to way too many people and getting a bit too excited. And I just treasure those moments though, because I do think being a musician who kind of started online, I I just really treasure the like real life interaction so much that it can feel daunting to like say no to that. But I will try to have some sort of not disengagement, but some kind of boundary, because I do think it's maybe not super healthy after a while to keep doing that every night, although I love it. But yeah.
And it's in order to get you to the next city and the next show and perform your best for them.
Yeah, totally. I don't want to
balance.
Yeah, we never want to cancel a show or just, I've played shows while sick and it's just brutal, so I'm really trying not to do that.
Yeah, I totally think there's ways to, touring it can take such a hit on the body, and there's a lot happening. And I love the book, The Body Keeps the Score, because it absolutely does. And it will tell you.
I haven't read it, but
so good. You have to read it.
So many friends of mine have recommended it.
It's so, essentially, it talks a lot about how trauma is stored within the body. And oftentimes, there's a quote that's, if you don't plan a day of the week to rest, your body will tell you when that day is. Because it's true, if you push and go really, really hard, ultimately your body's going to tell you when that doesn't work anymore. So when I look at artists and I talk to artists that are touring, it's so real in terms of preserving your energy, both emotionally and physically. And I can imagine, if you're on stage for an hour and a half and then off stage talking to not only fans but band, everyone who's there, friends and family that come to see you, it's a lot of like overstimulation, and there's a lot happening that I can imagine that there eventually comes a point where you're like, all right, something has to pull back in order for me to be my best self at all the future shows.
Totally.
It's a push and pull.
It really is, and it also just sucks because like I just love my band so much that I want to talk to them all the time. And I remember we had one day, I think we were in Europe, or I can't remember where. Maybe this is a tour we did last year in the fall, but I just fully needed to be on vocal rest. But I just feel so much FOMO not talking to them, and because they're just really funny and we just have the best time. And I was literally using like a dictation app just to like offer some thoughts in, or just to say like, can we get food? Or like, that's so funny, haha. Like, I don't know. It's just, it's a blessing and a curse, I think, to be surrounded by like really lovely people.
Yeah.
I just don't ever want to shut up, But,
and coming from this season that you said, you've been in hibernation this summer with like this body of music and putting it out in the world. Do you imagine that now that the album is out, that there is a release to that you're able to share that with other people, your band, the fans, that there's kind of this full circle moment?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like, it's a huge burst of energy just to be able to even say like, I finished a fucking album. Like it's just a great feeling. And it's, I think that's part of it too, the sort of hibernation of like just preparing and understanding where I want this music to fall and how I want it to feel. That, I think there will be a sort of nice big release of that.
First of all, it's a huge accomplishment to do a debut album to begin with. A lot of time, energy, and not only a debut album, but a debut album that is like of beautiful length and not like a 20-minute debut album.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part of listening to the album, that it was a proper album.
I haven't heard a 20-minute.
There's some,
I don't think that counts.
The albums these days were pushing 20 to 35 minutes.
I was having this conversation the other day. I don't think, maybe it's controversial, but I don't think like 6 to 7 songs is an album. I think
it's an EP.
Yeah, agreed.
I think it's an EP.
Yeah.
We're towing the line of EP and LP in 2024.
I mean, I don't think mine is like the longest it could ever be. I feel like 41 minutes is like pretty average length.
Were there any songs that did not make the cut?
There were a few. I mean, I'm not one of those artists who can write like 50 songs and then just have my pick of the litter. But yeah, there were a few that didn't make it. And I think I'm glad they didn't. I honestly think our conversation would have changed a lot if especially there was this one ballad that was really heavy. And I think I'm glad that maybe that song is just for me.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's nice just to have those secrets kind of kept within instead of out in the world. I don't know. There's something nice about that.
Yeah. And I think timing is also everything too. And if there's a day where you feel compelled to release that, it'll happen. I'm very much a universe person, that I believe things are aligned and it'll
Me too.
be meant the way it's meant.
Yeah, I feel like I've been told that since I was born, of just like everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, but I didn't believe it until I got older.
Really?
I think when I was younger, I was very skeptic and was like, yeah, okay.
I feel like I was actually the opposite, where when I was younger, I was like, okay, because, this happened, and now sometimes I'm like frustrated with the universe, or I feel like I have just more consciousness to even think about why things happen, that things feel unfair that they happen, or, but it's a fantastic and sort of brutal thing to live by, that everything happens for a reason, because it's like, okay, I just got to go with it. There's kind of, it's a weird, like, it alleviates a lot of choice almost, because it's like, okay, this, whatever is meant to be will be. And that can feel kind of frustrating for me sometimes. I
think when I was younger, experienced a lot of grief and sudden tragedy. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think I was more skeptic of it, because it was more, I'm angry at the world and how could you tell me that this happened for a reason? Yeah. Whereas now that I'm older, I can look back and see, maybe not that it happened for a reason, but that it shaped me into who I am. And there was reasons that it molded me and how I see the world and my own perspective, and where I choose to see light and beauty from those tragic moments.
I will say, like, in the heat of a moment, though, it's like one of the worst pieces of advice you can be given.
In the heat of a moment, absolutely.
Like something deeply tragic or incredibly frustrating has just happened. It's like everything happens for a reason. It's like, I know, but do I need that right now? Not really.
That's one of those, like, I don't want to say cop out, but it's one of those, like, easy one-liners to just give if you don't know what to say. But it's not necessarily supportive or helpful when someone's in the moment or is experiencing a really intense emotion.
Yeah, or I feel like it's kind of similar to, as well, like, when you're kind of out of a relationship, or like you're kind of searching for a specific kind of love in your life, and people will say to you, like, love will find you, like when it's meant to. And you're like, yeah, I know. Thank you very much. And it's just so, I don't know, it can be agitating. But it's also true. Like, both of those things are true.
There's an element of
things
truth.
will find you when they're meant to,
Yes, the one I stick with is what's meant for me won't miss me.
What's meant for me?
What's meant for me won't miss me.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
And I look at that a lot in terms of career and life and transitions. Yeah. And as we evolve, that, certain opportunities may miss me, but then it's not meant for me. Yeah. And I have to trust the universe and its timing that things will fall into place as they're meant to.
That's funny. I've never heard that.
Really?
Negative, yeah.
It's a good one. I'm a very, like, affirmation quotey person.
Really?
Is there a quote or a lyric that you really come back to often that you'd like to share with the listeners as we close out?
I really don't know. This isn't really a direct answer to your question, but I recently, like, I feel a lot when I will see these graphs that people will draw to represent different things. Mm-hmm. So people will draw lines to represent fate, or things to represent, like, what we've been talking about, if everything happens for a reason. And I was really moved by one that was just like all these different dots on a surface and all these lines. And it was just like, so all of the choices and decisions that might lead me to you. And it's just like, I don't know, I feel sometimes like so troubled by fate and like the bigness of the universe. And it's just such a daunting emotion sometimes to feel so small and just so, unimportant in the grand scheme of things. And but then you remember that, like, even our conversation today, there's so many choices that you could attribute from before you were born that leads people to being in the same room. And it's just a very beautiful thing. It's like the next subconscious, conscious choices that I make will lead me somewhere else. And I don't know, something about that is just very hopeful and very cool to me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah. And I think as vast as the universe is, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but nature is fascinating to me, that as small as we are, that there's entire ecosystems that exist and oceans and plants and things that have their place in this world that exist far beyond us and our tiny little microcosm of a big universe. It's really special and beautiful. Totally. But I like that.
Totally. I saw like 6 shooting stars for the first time a few weeks ago, and it was just terrifying. Like, so terrifying that they were moving up there. Like, I was just not used to it at all. But yeah.
And it's almost inexplainable. And I think there's something special about not being able to explain it.
Yeah, totally.
But it just is.
Witness it. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Remind me to show you something after this. I'm going to show you an account that's graphs.
Okay.
You'll like it also.
Okay. I'm excited.
Everyone, thank you for listening and watching wherever you are. Sarah's debut album, Escaper, is out now. Check her out on the road. She's on a headlining tour through November, right? Yes. We're going to be out till November. Be sure to grab tickets to see her. And if you like what you watched today, please comment, like, subscribe, all the things, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.